I'm going to teach you everything you need to know about EGR with actual science. Science you can believe. Probably. Oh, I'm in trouble. Sounds cool. Doesn't work. It's dumb. Real dumb. Tune it out of your life. Block it. Delete the whole system. Increase engine life. You've been warned. Now, I'm not your Uncle Sam or the governor of California, so I'm not going to tell you whether you need to keep it or delete it. That's between you and God. I'm just going to tell you the facts about EGR so you can just ignore them and do whatever you were going to do anyway. Because you're a man and you're stubborn. And America! Big picture. Engines produce emissions. One of those is NOx. NOx is bad for people. Allegedly. EGR reduces NOx. The end. Almost. EGR is exhaust gas recirculation, and it's just like it sounds. An EGR system recirculates a portion of the exhaust gases back through the engine in an attempt to save mankind from the combustion of dinosaurs. Now let's do some 13th grade chemistry here before we go any further. Just stick with me for 30 seconds, okay? NOx will form anytime you have sufficient heat in the presence of oxygen and nitrogen. NOx is NO or NO2, not N2O. That's nitrous. Nitrous makes laughter and horsepower, and those are good. The air we breathe in the US of A is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% burnt gunpowder. So all you need is a heat source in excess of about 2200 degrees freedom, and you're making NOx. And guess where that happens? Volcanoes, California wildfires, and in your combustion chamber. Congratulations, you now know more about EGR than about 98% of human beings. Now that includes your congressmen and mainstream media. But why stop there? I'm gonna make you experts. So here's the plan. First, I'm going to tell you how EGR actually works, because it's not doing what you think it's doing. Probably. Secondly, I'm going to tell you how it affects your engine, because you might want to know the pros and cons of EGR before you start spending your time and money to get yourself on the EPA's most wanted list. And lastly, I'm going to explain how someone might choose to deal with their EGR system if they happen to live in a country where federal emissions laws don't exist, or at least where they're not enforced, like Mexico or parts of Canada, I think. Canadians, help us out. Let us know in the comments. Does the federal government or law enforcement actually care up there? So there's the roadmap. But first, do you know why thunderstorms create that distinct sweet, chlorine, I just stuck my tongue to a Duracell 9-volt battery smell? Well, it's because lightning creates NOx and ozone every time it flashes. And you're smelling the ozone part of that reaction. Yep. Lightning bolts can reach 50,000 degrees freedom, and that's certainly hot enough to cause those promiscuous little oxygen and nitrogen compounds in the free man's air to start breeding little NOx babies. It's the exact same thing that's happening in your engine, except the EPA and DOJ aren't sending $1.7 billion fines to Mother Nature. Yet. Now don't use lightning to justify deleting your EGR system. Use a different excuse. Lightning only accounts for about 10% of the NOx production in the Earth's atmosphere, while fossil fuels accounts for about 60%. Allegedly. At least, that's what we're told by this article from Atmospheric Chemistry and Physics. And I'm completely aware that you can torture the data until it tells you anything you want to hear. So please, leave your politics at the door. This video isn't about what emissions do to humans and the Earth. We'll never all agree on that. This video is about what EGR does to your engine and its emissions. That being said, I'm pretty sure Al Gore invented climate change. Just saying. Let me discuss 3 main myths, and then we can talk about what EGR actually does. Myth 1, EGR reduces emissions. Not true. EGR does not reduce the amount or volume of emissions coming out of your engine. It reduces the amount of NOx in your emissions. If your giant diesel truck belches out 25 pounds of exhaust emissions per gallon of diesel without an EGR, it's going to belch out 25 pounds per gallon of diesel with an EGR. And if you're wondering how 7 pounds of fuel can create 25 pounds of exhaust gases, air-fuel ratio. It's science. Myth number 2, EGR burns off harmful emissions. EGR is not designed to reburn exhaust gas in an attempt to burn off harmful pollutants, mostly. Now it can and will cause the engine to reburn any remaining hydrocarbons in the exhaust, but that's just a fortunate byproduct of its intended purpose, which is to reduce NOx. And myth number 3, the EPA is trying to get rid of diesels by mandating EGR. Not true. The EPA does not mandate or require EGR systems. It's not Miller time, it's sparkling water time. Holy my lip. The EPA just sets the maximum NOx output, and the OEM chooses the most economical strategy to achieve it, which is generally EGR. So there's your 3 big myths. Now this video is applicable to both gas and diesel engines, but I'm going to focus on diesel engines specifically because I'm a man. So I like wasting exorbitant amounts of money on repairs and maintenance. It's dumb. Real dumb. Okay, so like I've said at least twice in the last 69 seconds, the purpose of EGR is to reduce NOx emissions, which may or may not be linked to acid rain, respiratory diseases, cancers, and general idiocracy. And it would probably be helpful if you understood how much NOx reduction we're talking about here. As you can see in these graphs, it's a considerable reduction. My kids are so loud. I got the kids, I got the texts, what's all this nonsense? It's approximately a 75 to 80% reduction at full load. And this is from dieselnet.com, which is owned and operated by the authors of this book. So it's reputable data, probably. Now the way EGR achieves this reduction is by recirculating those evil exhaust gases back through the engine to burn all the bad NOx out of it, right? Wrong. That's the logical explanation that you've always been told, and something I used to say myself before I learned to read books. Like this, and this. And one of my all-time favorites, How to Talk to Your Cat About Gun Safety. But that's not how EGR works, at all. Your engine does not incinerate NOx. Heat creates NOx. Trying to burn off NOx is like trying to spend your way out of debt. Sounds cool, doesn't work. Okay, so how does EGR work? How does it do what it do? EGR isn't used to burn off NOx. EGR is used to prevent it from ever being formed in the first place. And EGR does this by one, and yes, I know I spelled do wrong. That's a play on words. It's kind of like a dad joke. Corny, but fulfilling. One, it reduces the amount of oxygen in the cylinder or the combustion chamber. And two, it lowers combustion temperature. And no, writing with a Magnum Sharpie is not my superpower. That could be better. Less available oxygen and less heat means less NOx production. It's that simple. All right, number one, reduces available oxygen. That's pretty straightforward. Exhaust gas is inert because its oxygen has already been used up by combustion. When you reintroduce it back into the intake stream, you've just lowered the overall oxygen ratio of the intake charge. So now there's less oxygen available to form NOx. Now this might sound counterproductive to making power, but you have to realize, in a diesel, there's almost always more oxygen available than is needed. The stoichiometric ratio for diesel is 14.5 to 1, meaning 14.5 pounds of air mixes perfectly with 1 pound of diesel fuel. But diesels generally won't even run clean below about 20 to 1, and depending on the operating conditions, the air-fuel ratio in the cylinder can be as high as 70 to 1 or even more. So, displacing some of the oxygen really isn't a big deal. It matters, but not much. Now number two, lowering combustion temperature, that's a little more complex. It involves chemistry and thermodynamics. But before we jump into those two things, let's talk about the elephant in the room. You're probably asking yourself how pumping hot exhaust gases into the intake can cool things down. And that's a perfectly reasonable question. Because in general, as intake temps go up, combustion and exhaust gas temperatures also go up. Hotter air in means hotter air out. That's logical logic. I mean, intercoolers exist for a reason, right? To lower the intake air temp after it goes to the supercharger, or the turbocharger, or turbochargers. And, oh by the way, manufacturers starting adding intercoolers to diesel pickups back in the 90s to reduce NOx production. They weren't added to increase horsepower. It's the NOx. Because again, cooler air in means cooler combustion temps and less NOx. But in reality, cooled EGR doesn't have a drastic effect on intake air temps. So let's switch from scientific papers to real life. Common sense tells you hot exhaust gases are going to warm up the intake temperatures. But I can see mine right there in the top right corner. And the intake air temperature difference between 0% EGR and 10 or 15% EGR, which is about all I ever see, has virtually no effect on the intake air temps. So yes, hot exhaust gases being pumped into the intake sounds bad, but in reality, it's not really making any difference, at least on my truck. So as you can see, EGR isn't having a drastic effect on intake air temps, but it does have a drastic effect on combustion rate. That's right here. Not sure you noticed, but I had to redraw this so I can move this up. Anyway, EGR makes the diesel burn slower. And this is where the chemistry comes into play. Diesels pretty much always have excess oxygen available in the cylinders, meaning the diesel molecules find an oxygen molecule to mate with really quickly, like speed dating. So you get a very quick, very intense release of heat and extremely high combustion temperatures. Smells like propane and burnt hair in here now. Anyway, when you introduce inert exhaust gas into the cylinder, there's less oxygen available in the cylinder, and that means it takes more time for the diesel to find available oxygen for combustion, meaning the diesel burns slower and releases its heat over a longer period of time, thus lowering the maximum combustion temperature. It's science, but wait, there's more. Higher heat capacity. This is where the thermodynamics comes in. Now stick with me, because this is 6th grade thermo. Not sure that's a thing. The inert exhaust gas getting pumped into the intake stream has a higher heat capacity than the ambient air that your engine ingests. and the higher heat capacity intake charge means there will be a lower maximum combustion temperature. Heat capacity is defined as the amount of heat to be supplied to a substance or object to produce a unit change in its temperature. A higher heat capacity means it takes more heat to raise the temperature. Now let me use water and oil and these nuts to demonstrate heat capacity. I could have used my balls of steel, but I really just wanted to say these nuts. Now this is 140 Canadian grams of water and 140 grams of oil. So both are the same mass and same temperature. Almost. These nuts are both the same mass and about to be the same temperature because we're going to boil these nuts. And boiled nuts are going to be about 212 degrees freedom. So when I put these in the fluid, like little tea bags, you'll see that the temperature of the water increases less because water has a higher heat capacity than oil. Probably. Okay, let's do some science. 76.7, 78.7. Boiled nuts. Okay, it's been long enough. The water's 85 degrees. And the oil's 90 degrees. Okay, I'd call that successful science. Same mass of water, same mass of oil, same nuts, same temperature. The water temp rose about 8 degrees Fahrenheit, the oil temp raised about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It makes sense. Water has a higher heat capacity. Same heat input, lower temperature change. It's science. The same thing happens in the cylinder when the higher heat capacity exhaust gases are reintroduced into the combustion air. The combustion air now has a higher heat capacity, so the combustion doesn't produce as high of a maximum temperature. Lower combustion temperature means less NOx, and less power, and less efficiency. But I digress. So there you go. Now you know how EGR does what it does. And now that you're all global climate change experts, let's talk about the positive and negative effects that EGR has on your engine. And this is based on actual scientific experimentation, not anecdotal evidence or Google AI. Almost intelligent. Now I'll be citing from SAE 1999-01-0839. I think I got that right. Titled, The Effects of EGR on Diesel Engine Wear. And I'll also be citing an entry from the journal Energies, titled, A Review of the External and Internal Residual Exhaust Gas in the Internal Combustion Engine. Seems like a title a non-American came up with. It's okay. This one is actually open source, so I'll leave a link to it in the description in case you guys want to geek out on it. But first, a word from today's sponsor, me. It takes time and money to buy these studies and produce these videos. So help me, help you. Subscribe, comment, like, and share. All you gotta do is click on the little subscribe button down in the corner. It costs you nothing and helps me make more and better content. Now back to garage science. Now let me provide the summary of effects of EGR on diesel engines. Straight from the journal Energies. There's 8 effects listed and only one of them's actually good. And that being the reduction of NOx. And you can argue whether that matters in the grand scheme of things or not, I don't care, but it is objectively true that EGR reduces NOx in a dramatic fashion. Now let's look at some of the negative effects that you actually care about. And I'll add one that isn't even on their list. Cost. So here we go. Increased purchase price. Increased harmful emissions. Yep, I said that. Reduced power. Increased maintenance. Increased fuel consumption. And the big one, increased engine wear. Okay. Increased purchase price. It costs more to build a vehicle with an EGR system, almost always. But Cummins actually incorporated EGR into their 2004.5 to 2007 5.9 liter Cummins engines, basically for free. If you didn't know, like I didn't know when I bought my 2006 Cummins truck, the EGR function is actually ground right into the camshaft. That's called internal EGR. It doesn't have external components like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. That's called internal EGR. Most of you are familiar with external EGR, which incorporates EGR valves and EGR coolers that spill Dexcool on your carpet. We don't have to tell my wife about that. Yep, Cummins just adjusted the injection events in the ECU and added a little extra overlap in the time that the intake and exhaust valves were both open by changing the cam profile. And boom, free EGR. And now it makes sense why my 2006 Cummins has never gotten better than 16 mpg. Thanks, Cummins. Now, increased harmful emissions. Yep. While EGR does reduce NOx, it actually increases soot, carbon monoxide, and residual hydrocarbons in the exhaust. So there's that. Help me out here, EPA. Why didn't one of you tell me that I had soot on my nose a minute ago? Causes cancer in the state of California. I could have been killed. Reduced power output. Yep, EGR reduces horsepower. Check out this graph from Energies that shows how torque drops as EGR rate increases. Think about it like this. When you tune your truck, one of the major parameters that you adjust is injection timing. More injection timing advance means more power, for the most part. You want to get the fuel in early. You want to get it in quickly. You want to build as much heat and pressure as you possibly can without torching something. Because heat and cylinder pressure create torque and horsepower. and NOx. So reducing cylinder temperature and pressure to reduce NOx reduces power. Thanks, EPA. Okay, increased maintenance. And this is twofold. One, diesels accumulate soot in the engine oil, and diesels with EGR accumulate soot in the oil faster. So this can necessitate more frequent oil changes, increased cost. And two, when you combine soot from the EGR system with oil from the crankcase ventilation system inside your cylinder head, you get grade A schmoo that will likely need to be cleaned out eventually to maintain performance. Eventually, maybe. This is the schmoo in the EGR valve off 197,000 mile LBT Duramax. And yes, I have a 197,000 mile LBT Duramax, but I certainly didn't take this off of that truck. It'd be illegal. So removing components to clean out the schmoo increases cost. I once used a blowtorch, compressed air, and a Volkswagen TDI intake manifold to accidentally make a rocket engine while trying to clean out schmoo. It's kind of a rocket. It didn't fly, but it sounded like one. It's good enough. 300,000 miles worth of that schmoo took the ID of that intake manifold from about 2 inches down to about 1 inch. So I was having serious performance issues. Oh, and bonus, number 3, all that extra soot can cause sticky veins in your VGT turbo. It's a lot of fun pulling the turbo off a V8 diesel engine in a pickup truck. All right, increased fuel consumption. In a diesel, EGR is generally going to reduce efficiency. This chart from Energy shows an increase in brake-specific fuel consumption as EGR rate increases. Now these tests are performed on generators which get 0 miles per gallon, so they measured brake-specific fuel consumption instead. Brake-specific fuel consumption is how much fuel it takes to produce a specific amount of power. A rise in brake-specific fuel consumption is a decrease in efficiency, or MPG. All right, increased engine wear. And let's be real, this is why most people say they need to delete the EGR, because the EGR makes the engine eat its own poo. The interweb tells you that the soot wears the rings, and the soot destroys the oil, which destroys the engine, and the soot probably caused your first divorce. And EGR is just the EPA's way of getting rid of diesels. Just thought I'd throw that one in there. And I can tell you that from my research of several technical papers, that in lab results, EGR does increase engine wear in worst case scenario testing. So let me show you some data, and then tell you why it makes a difference, but why it also doesn't matter, probably. If you have or have had an EGR-equipped diesel truck, go down to the comments, tell us the year and engine type, and the number of miles you're able to squeeze out of that engine. My guess is that there will be some extremely high mileage EGR-equipped trucks. From Energies, this chart is contrasting piston ring wear with and without EGR. The top ring wears more without EGR, and the second, third, and oil control rings wear more with EGR. The top piston ring is exposed to higher combustion temperatures without EGR, causing it to experience more wear. Probably. But when you add EGR to the engine, the lower rings actually wear more because of the increased soot in the engine oil. So at least according to this study, EGR deletes are a double-edged sword. And I like swords. So you can either have more top ring wear without EGR or more lower ring wear with EGR. From Energies, this chart shows the relative wear scar obtained on a test rig, not on an engine, using carbon black in the oil in increasing percentages. Carbon black is basically soot. EGR puts soot in the oil. More soot means more wear on a test rig that is actually designed to create wear. From SAE, these charts show soot and iron wear metals for an engine with and without EGR for multiple oil changes over the course of 2,000 engine hours. Now this is an engine at medium to full load and a 25% EGR rate. And that's not really representative of most applications outside of a tractor or a boat in the state of California. From SAE, these charts show ring and liner wear for an engine running clean versus aged oil at increasing EGR rates. And as you can see, the aged engine oil caused significantly more wear regardless of the EGR rate. But it made the most difference at higher EGR rates. Now don't go jumping on your more frequent oil changes is better soapbox. Let's look at the definition of aged oil. As you can see, the viscosity, soot percentage, oxidation, and wear metals are off the charts high before the oil is ever even used in this test. You need to run that oil for years and tens of thousands of miles to end up with oil that looks anywhere near this bad. This isn't like the difference between changing oil at 5,000 miles versus 10,000 miles. This is like the difference between changing your oil at 5,000 miles and 55,000 miles. What is that in kilometers? Like 100,000? That's 88,000 kilometers for you Canadians. I googled it. Now here are some of the conclusions from that SAE paper. Number 1 is really not much of a surprise. The wear of the piston rings and the cylinder liners are related to the EGR level applied and the age of the oil. 2, the rate of oil aging increased as the EGR rate increased. Number 3 is very interesting. EGR increased component wear at high load levels, but it did not affect low load wear levels. So cruising down the highway at a reasonable speed, no increased wear. Towing a 34-foot travel trailer up a mountain, more wear. Number 4, the level of carbon present in the cylinder has a fundamental influence on piston ring and liner wear and on oil quality. When EGR level increased, the carbon level increased. And number 5 is significant since this test was performed in 1999 and we have a different fuel now in 2025. high fuel sulfur content increased engine wear with or without EGR. So while the older, higher sulfur fuels might have been better for lubricating fuel system components, they actually increased engine wear. So we might be killing CP4s and injectors, but we're saving engines. I guess we should be thankful for ultra-low sulfur diesel. So the SAE concluded that carbon production is a major source of engine wear with EGR, allegedly. So what can we glean from all that science? Well, that you can significantly increase engine wear if you run the engine oil 5 times longer than the recommended interval, or if you use extremely high EGR rates while towing crap, this is not high quality bacon. While towing an oversized load up the longest hill in the world on the hottest day in recorded history. Oh, and by the way, that testing was done on an engine using late 90s emission standards, a Bosch VE mechanical injection pump, single shot 5-hole injectors, and a fixed geometry turbo. So if you consider an outdated engine that already produces gobs of soot because it doesn't employ modern electronics, modern high pressure injection systems, modern turbocharging, and subjected to conditions far outside of its normal operating parameters, the EGR will increase engine wear substantially. But, and that's a J-Lo size but, there are plenty of examples of modern EGR-equipped diesel pickup trucks that run over 1 million miles. And that's Duramax, Cummins, and Power Stroke engines. Pick your poison, they're all capable of it. I'll actually leave some links to high mileage emissions-equipped trucks down in the description. And let's not forget, semis run EGRs just like diesel pickups do, and they routinely go over 1 million miles. And remember, none of these trucks I'm referring to had to change their oil every 3,000 miles to hit that 1 million mile mark. Semis routinely go 20, 30, or 40,000 miles without an oil change. So, in the real world, where most of us wish we didn't actually live, EGR is not destroying your engine. EGR might be making a difference in your engine life, but likely not enough to matter to most people. The engine, with a functioning EGR, will likely outlive your desire to continue owning that truck anyway. So, if you spend the time and money to optimize your EGR, you may increase engine life. Maybe. But will it make sense financially? I don't know. You can do your own math. Alright, let's move on to point 3, subsection 9. EGR options. Now that we've established that your EGR system may or may not be slowly destroying your engine, let's discuss ways to minimize the negative effects for those people that live in Mexico or people that only operate their competition vehicles on a closed course not subject to federal emissions laws. Let's start with the legal options. All right. Number 1. Ignore it like the cholesterol score from your doctor. EGR is not likely to cause the demise of your engine, probably. But prayers help. Number 2. How do you spell proper? So I got 2 P's? Use quality oil and filters and change them at the proper interval. Any diesel oil that meets the current API specs for diesel engines is quality oil. And that includes any oil you're going to find on the shelf at Walmart. Even the cheapest ones are good enough. But synthetic engine oils and higher viscosity oils like 1540 are less volatile, meaning they will vaporize less and reduce schmoo production because there will be less oil vapors entering your intake tract through the crankcase ventilation system. I use premium oils like this on the engines that I run well beyond the proper oil change interval. And yes, proper oil change interval is very subjective. But the only real way to know what the proper oil change interval is for your vehicle and operating conditions is to run a used oil analysis. Or maybe 2. And go ahead and spend the extra $10 to get a soot percentage test, because that's what the EGR is really affecting. Telling people they're stupid in my comment section unless they change their oil every 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, or half the OEM recommended interval, just because that's the way you want to do it, is a meaningless opinion with no scientific basis, and it kind of makes you look a little foolish. But do it anyway because comments make the algorithm happy. And now I'll list, but not recommend, due to current federal emissions regulations, other EGR optimization strategies. Number 3, tune it out of your life. Some people buy tuning hardware and software, become tuning experts by watching a 30-minute video on the YouTubes, and figure out how to reduce EGR demand in the ECU. Hell, Volkswagen and Cummins both took that approach, and it only cost them millions of dollars in EPA fines. Number 4, block it. People buy block-off plates that prevent the flow of exhaust gases through the system. The EGR system remains on the engine, which appears stock and legal. But at that point, the system is simply dead weight and nothing more than a potential coolant leak. Number 5, camshaft swap. And this one is specific to 2004.5 to 2007 5.9 liter Cummins engines that use internal EGR. Swap the camshaft to a nice aftermarket camshaft. Your transmission will still need to be replaced every 100,000 miles, but your truck will have better fuel economy, less smoke, and longer engine life. Maybe. And number 6. And finally, go full regalia. delete the whole system. Full EGR delete. Remove all the associated EGR hardware, EGR valve, EGR cooler, piping, hoses, sensors, etc. An EGR system can't do EGR things if it doesn't exist. But beware, disabling or deleting your EGR system without adjusting your engine calibration can actually damage your engine due to increased combustion and exhaust gas temperatures. You've been warned. Obviously, I would never do that because I'm a law-abiding citizen. So there you go, the facts about EGR. Now you can ignore everything I just said, move forward with your EGR transgressions, whilst not being ignorant of the pros, cons, science, and legalities of your actions. Now, regardless of whether you're in the EGR keep or delete camp, if you drive a diesel, you are getting soot in your oil. And that soot is reducing the life of your engine oil and arguably your engine. If you want to learn about ways to reduce those effects, go watch my videos on bypass filtration, which I've linked in the description. And if you've made it this far, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button and leave a comment on something you'd like me to discuss. All that helps me grow the channel and reach more people. So thanks again for watching, and as always, stay curious.